Sarah wiped the sweat from her forehead as she finished cleaning the last table at the diner. It was nearly midnight, and her feet ached from standing all day. The rain pounded against the windows, creating a steady rhythm that matched her exhaustion. She had been working double shifts for 3 weeks straight, trying to save enough money for her 8-year-old daughter Emma's school supplies. As she gathered her things and prepared to lock up, she noticed a man sitting on the bench outside. He was soaked from the rain, shivering in what looked like an expensive suit that was now ruined. His head was in his hands and he seemed completely lost. Sarah hesitated for a moment, her mother's voice echoing in her head about being careful around strangers, especially at night. But something about the man's posture reminded her of her own moments of desperation. She knew what it felt like to be alone with nowhere to go. Against her better judgment, she opened the door and called out to him. "Excuse me, are you okay?" she asked, staying safely in the doorway. The man looked up, and she could see he had been crying. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, and his usually confident demeanor was nowhere to be found. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice hoarse. "I didn't mean to bother anyone. I was just trying to figure out what to do next." Sarah noticed he had no umbrella, no coat, and seemed to have nothing with him except his phone, which appeared to be dead. The nearest hotel was 20 miles away, and the buses had stopped running hours ago. The taxi service in their small town shut down at 10 p.m. "When's the last time you ate?" she found herself asking. He thought for a moment. "Yesterday morning, I think. Maybe longer. It's been a rough couple of days." Sarah's heart went out to him. She had been in similar situations. After Emma's father left them 3 years ago, there were nights when she didn't know where their next meal would come from or if they'd have a roof over their heads. The kindness of strangers had saved her more than once. "Look, I know this is going to sound crazy, and you probably think I'm insane for offering, but I have a couch at my place. It's not much, but it's dry and warm. You can stay the night, and in the morning maybe you can figure out your next step." The man stared at her in disbelief. "I couldn't possibly impose on you. You don't even know me. I could be dangerous." Sarah studied his face carefully. Despite everything, there was something genuine about him. His eyes held pain, not malice. "You're right. I don't know you, but I've been where you are, and someone helped me once. Maybe it's time to pay it forward." After several minutes of back and forth, the man finally accepted her offer. He introduced himself simply as David, and Sarah led him to her small apartment, above the bakery next door. The place was tiny but clean, with mismatched furniture and toys scattered around from Emma's playtime. "My daughter is staying at her grandmother's tonight," Sarah explained as she pulled out some blankets and a pillow. "She does that every Tuesday so I can work the late shift at the diner." David looked around the modest home with genuine appreciation. The walls were covered with Emma's artwork, and despite the obvious financial struggles, everything was organized and cared for. "This is really kind of you, Sarah. I promise I'll be gone first thing in the morning." Sarah made him a simple sandwich and gave him some hot tea. As they sat in the small kitchen, David began to open up about his situation. He had lost everything in what he described as a business deal gone wrong. His partner had betrayed him, taking not just money but also turning their mutual friends against him. He had been staying in hotels for weeks, watching his savings disappear, until he finally ran out of money completely. "I've never felt so alone in my life," he admitted, staring into his teacup. "I built my whole world around work and success, and when that crumbled, I realized I had nothing else. No real friends, no family I could turn to. Just emptiness." Sarah listened without judgment. She recognized the look in his eyes because she had seen it in the mirror during her darkest days. "Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find out what really matters," she said softly. "I learned that the hard way too." They talked until nearly 2 in the morning. David learned about Sarah's struggles as a single mother, how she worked, multiple jobs to make ends meet, and how she never gave up hope that things would get better. Sarah discovered that despite his expensive clothes and educated way of speaking, David was just as lost and scared as she had been. As Sarah prepared for bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was somehow meant to happen. There was something about David that seemed different from the usual drifters who passed through their small town. But she pushed those thoughts aside and focused on being grateful that she could help someone in need, just as others had helped her. Sarah woke up to the smell of coffee and something delicious cooking in her kitchen. For a moment she panicked, forgetting about her overnight guest. Then she remembered David and quickly threw on her robe to check on him. She found him standing at her small stove, expertly flipping pancakes while bacon sizzled in another pan. Her tiny kitchen, which usually felt cramped and outdated, somehow looked different with him in it. He had cleaned up remarkably well, though his expensive suit was wrinkled and still bore signs of yesterday's rain. "I hope you don't mind," David said, looking slightly embarrassed. "I wanted to make breakfast as a thank you. I found some ingredients in your pantry and took the liberty of running to the corner store to get a few things we needed." Sarah was touched by the gesture, but also curious about how he had money for groceries when he claimed to be broke the night before. "That's very thoughtful, but you didn't need to spend your money on me." David's cheeks reddened slightly. "I found some change in my suit pocket, not much, but enough for eggs and milk." He flipped another pancake with practiced ease. "I used to cook a lot before my life got so complicated. It helps me think." As they ate breakfast together, Sarah found herself studying David more closely, in the morning light. Despite his claims of being down on his luck, there was something about him that didn't quite add up. His hands were soft, not like someone who had been doing manual labor or living rough. His posture was confident, even in his current situation, and the way he moved around the kitchen suggested he was used to being in charge. "So what exactly did you do for work?" Sarah asked casually, buttering her pancakes. David hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I was in business. International trade mostly, import and export of various goods. It required a lot of travel, which is probably why I don't have much of a personal life to fall back on now." Sarah nodded, but something in his vague answer made her wonder if there was more to the story. Still, she didn't want to pry too much. Everyone deserved their privacy, especially when they were going through hard times. After breakfast, David insisted on doing the dishes while Sarah got ready for her morning shift at the bakery downstairs. She worked there from 6 a.m. to noon, then had a few hours break before her evening shift at the diner. It was exhausting, but the combined income from both jobs barely covered her and Emma's expenses. As she prepared to leave, David surprised her with another request. "Sarah, I know this is asking a lot, but would it be possible for me to stay one more night? I made some phone calls this morning and I might have a lead on getting back on my feet, but it won't happen until tomorrow." Sarah felt conflicted. Her natural inclination was to help, but having a stranger in her home for multiple nights felt risky, especially with Emma returning from her grandmother's that afternoon. On the other hand, David had been nothing but respectful and helpful. "Understand if you're not comfortable with that," David continued, noticing her hesitation. "I could try to find somewhere else." "It's not that I don't trust you," Sarah said carefully. "It's just that my daughter will be coming home today and I have to think about her safety first." David's face lit up with understanding and respect. "Of course. You're absolutely right to be cautious. I have a daughter too, though I haven't seen her in years because of my ex-wife. I completely understand your position." This revelation surprised Sarah. David hadn't mentioned having children the night before. "How old is she?" "She'd be 15 now," David said with a sad smile. "I miss so much of her growing up because I was always working. It's one of my biggest regrets." Sarah felt her heart soften. She recognized the pain of a parent separated from their child, even though her situation with Emma's father was very different. "What if you met Emma first? If she feels comfortable with you being here, then you can stay another night. But if she seems uncomfortable at all, you'll need to find somewhere else." David agreed immediately to these terms, grateful for even the possibility of another night off the streets. As Sarah headed downstairs to start her bakery shift, she wondered what she was getting herself into. There was definitely more to David's story than he was telling her, but whether that was good or bad remained to be seen. During her morning shift, Sarah found herself distracted, thinking about her mysterious houseguest. Mrs. Henderson, the bakery owner, noticed her preoccupation and asked about it. Sarah briefly explained the situation, leaving out some details. "You be careful, dear," Mrs. Henderson warned. "Not everyone is who they claim to be. Sometimes people down on their luck are there for good reason." But Sarah also remembered Mrs. Peterson from the diner, who often said, "Sometimes angels come disguised as people who need help." The blessing goes both ways. As noon approached, Sarah realized she was actually looking forward to seeing David again. Despite her caution, there was something about him that intrigued her. Maybe it was the way he had handled himself in the kitchen, or the genuine sadness in his eyes when he talked about his daughter. Whatever it was, Sarah found herself hoping that Emma would like him, and that her instincts about David were right. Emma bounded up the stairs to their apartment, her backpack bouncing with each step. She was excited to tell her mom about her sleepover at Grandma's house and show her the new drawing she had made. But when she opened the door, she stopped short at seeing a tall man in a wrinkled suit sitting at their kitchen table with her mother. "Emma, sweetheart, come here," Sarah said gently, standing up to greet her daughter. "I want you to meet someone. This is David. He needed a place to stay last night, and I helped him out." Emma studied David with the intense curiosity that only 8-year-olds possess. She noticed everything: his kind eyes, the way he stood up respectfully when she entered, and how he waited for her to make the first move instead of trying to force a conversation. "Hi, Emma," David said with a warm smile. "Your mom has told me a lot about you. She says you're an amazing artist." Emma looked at her mother, then back at David. "Are you going to stay here again tonight?" David knelt down to Emma's eye level, a gesture that immediately caught Sarah's attention. "That depends on whether you're comfortable with me being here. This is your home and you should feel safe in it. If you don't want me to stay, I completely understand, and I'll find somewhere else to go." This response clearly impressed Emma. Most adults either talked down to her or made decisions without asking her opinion. "What happened to your house?" "I lost it," David said honestly. "I made some bad choices with my work, and now I'm trying to figure out how to start over." Emma considered this for a moment. "When Daddy left, we lost our old house too. It was scary at first, but then we found this place, and it's even better because it's just me and Mommy." Sarah felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment at Emma's candid statement, but David nodded seriously. "Starting over can be scary, but sometimes it leads to better things. Your mom is very brave for taking care of you all by herself." "I know," Emma said matter-of-factly. "She works really hard. Are you going to get a new job soon?" "I hope so," David replied. "I'm working on it." Emma seemed satisfied with his answers. She went to her room to put away her things, then returned with her art supplies. "Do you want to see what I'm drawing?" For the next hour, Sarah watched in amazement as David sat patiently with Emma, genuinely interested in her artwork and stories. He asked thoughtful questions about her drawings and even helped her with a tricky part of her latest project. There was something natural about the way he interacted with children that suggested he was telling the truth about having a daughter of his own. When Sarah had to leave for her evening shift at the diner, Emma surprised everyone by asking if David could stay for dinner. "I want to show him how to make Mommy's special grilled cheese," she announced. Sarah hesitated, but seeing how comfortable Emma seemed with David made her decision easier. "Okay, but you both need to promise me you'll be good while I'm gone. Emma, you know the rules about strangers." "He's not a stranger anymore, Mommy," Emma said with 8-year-old logic. "Strangers don't know how to make pancakes or ask permission to stay in your house." David promised to take good care of Emma and have her in bed by her usual bedtime. As Sarah walked to work, she felt lighter somehow, as if sharing the responsibility of caring for Emma, even briefly, had lifted some weight from her shoulders. At the diner, she found it hard to concentrate on her work. She kept thinking about David and Emma together, wondering what they were talking about and if she had made the right decision. Her co-worker Jenny noticed her distraction. "You keep checking your phone," Jenny observed. "Everything okay at home?" Sarah explained the situation, and Jenny's eyes widened. "Girl, are you crazy? You let a complete stranger stay in your house with your daughter?" "I know it sounds insane," Sarah admitted, But there's something different about him. He's not like other people who drift through town. And Emma likes him, which is rare. She's usually shy around new people. Just be careful, Jenny warned. You've got a good heart, Sarah, but sometimes that can get you in trouble. When Sarah returned home that evening, she found David and Emma playing a board game at the kitchen table. Emma was giggling at something David had said, and the apartment felt warmer and more alive than it had in months. David had also somehow managed to organize the living room and do the dishes without being asked. "Mommy," Emma called out excitedly. "David taught me how to play chess and he helped me with my math homework. Did you know he's really good at numbers?" Sarah raised an eyebrow at this information. "Is he now?" David looked slightly uncomfortable. "I just helped her with some basic addition problems. Nothing too complicated." But Sarah noticed that Emma's usually messy homework was now written in neat columns with perfectly calculated answers. The math problems that typically took Emma an hour to complete were all finished correctly. This wasn't the work of someone who just helped with basic addition. After Emma went to bed, Sarah confronted David gently. "You're very good with children, and clearly educated. Are you sure you've told me everything about your situation?" David was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. "Sarah, I've been more honest with you than I've been with anyone in years. Yes, there are things I haven't told you, but not because I want to deceive you. Some parts of my story are complicated, and I didn't want to burden you with details. That don't matter right now. But they might matter to me," Sarah said softly. "Especially if you're going to be around Emma." David looked up at her with those same sad eyes she had first seen in the rain. "You're right. You deserve to know more. Tomorrow, I promise I'll tell you everything. But tonight, can we just appreciate this moment of normalcy? It's been so long since I felt like I was part of something good." Sarah agreed, but as she lay in bed that night, she couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow's conversation would change everything. The next morning, Sarah woke up to find David already dressed and pacing nervously in the living room. His usually calm demeanor was replaced with obvious anxiety, and he kept checking his phone every few minutes. Emma was still sleeping, giving them a chance to talk privately. "You said you'd tell me everything today," Sarah reminded him gently, pouring herself a cup of the coffee he had already made. David took a deep breath and sat down across from her. "My name is David. That part is true. But I wasn't entirely honest about my situation." He paused, seeming to gather courage. "I'm the CEO of Morrison International, or at least I was until 3 days ago." Sarah nearly dropped her coffee cup. Morrison International was a huge company that she had heard about on the news. They owned hotels, restaurants, and businesses all over the world. "You're that David Morrison? The billionaire?" "Former billionaire, apparently," David said bitterly. "My business partner, someone I trusted like a brother, orchestrated a hostile takeover while I was dealing with some personal issues. He had been planning it for months, gathering allies on the board, making secret deals. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late." Sarah stared at him in disbelief. "But surely you have lawyers, accountants, people who can help. You fight this?" "I did, until I discovered that half of them were working with him too. The few who remained loyal are trying to help, but the legal process will take months, maybe years. In the meantime, my personal accounts have been frozen as part of the investigation. The board voted to remove me immediately, claiming I was mentally unfit to lead the company." "And the personal issues you mentioned?" David's face grew even more pained. "My ex-wife decided to remarry and move to Europe with my daughter. She's been trying to get full custody for years, claiming that my work schedule made me an unfit father. When the company troubles started, she used it as evidence that I was unstable. The court granted her request to take Lily overseas while the custody case is pending." Sarah felt her heart break for him. "So you lost your daughter and your company in the same week?" "The same day, actually. The board meeting was Tuesday morning. The custody hearing was Tuesday afternoon. By Wednesday, I was being escorted out of my own building by security guards. I've been living in hotels since then, trying to figure out my next move." "But why didn't you tell me this from the beginning?" David laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Would you have believed me?" A man claiming to be a billionaire CEO, wandering around soaked in the rain with no money? Besides, I've learned that when people know who I am, they either want something from me or they treat me differently. For the first time in years, someone was being kind to me just because I needed help, not because of what I could do for them. Sarah understood this logic, though she still felt slightly betrayed by his deception. So what happens now? Are you planning to fight for your company back? That's what the phone calls have been about. My lawyer thinks we have a good case, but it's going to be a long battle. The problem is, I need to stay in the area for court appearances and meetings, but I can't access my money until the legal issues are resolved. The little cash I had is almost gone. Before Sarah could respond, her phone rang. It was Mrs. Henderson from the bakery, and she sounded panicked. Sarah, honey, I need you to come in early today. We just got a huge catering order for this afternoon, and I can't handle it alone. Can you be here in 30 minutes? Sarah agreed, but as she hung up, she realized this created a new problem. Emma didn't have school that day due to a teacher planning session, and her grandmother wasn't available to babysit. I can watch Emma, David offered immediately. I know you barely know me, and after what I just told you, you might not trust me anymore. But I promise I'll take good care of her. Sarah was torn. On one hand, learning David's true identity made her feel like she didn't know him at all. On the other hand, if he really was David Morrison, he was probably less dangerous than she had originally feared. Rich people didn't typically harm children in small apartments. Please, Mom. Emma had appeared in the doorway, having overheard the conversation. David promised to teach me how to play a new card game today, and Mrs. Henderson makes the best cookies when she's stressed. You could bring some home. Against her better judgment, Sarah agreed. As she prepared to leave, David pulled her aside. Sarah, I know this changes things between us. If you want me to leave after today, I understand. But I want you to know that these past few days have been the most normal and happy I've felt in years. Emma reminds me of why I wanted to be a father in the first place. At the bakery, Sarah found it impossible to concentrate on making pastries. Her mind kept spinning with the revelation about David's identity. Mrs. Henderson noticed her distraction immediately. Honey, you're beating that dough like it owes you money. What's going on? Sarah briefly explained the situation, though she left out David's real identity. Not sure if she should share that information with anyone yet. Well, if he's taking good care of Emma, then maybe he's not as lost as he thinks he is, Mrs. Henderson said practically. Sometimes when everything else falls apart, taking care of someone else helps us find ourselves again. Meanwhile, back at the apartment, David was discovering that spending time with Emma was like therapy for his wounded soul. She had an 8-year-old's ability to find joy in simple things, and her questions helped him see his situation from a different perspective. If you used to be really rich, why are you sad about not being rich anymore? Emma asked as they worked on a puzzle together. Because I thought that's what made me important, David admitted. I thought people liked me because of my money and my job. That's silly, Emma said matter-of-factly. Mommy likes you, and she doesn't care about money. She cares about whether people are nice and whether they help other people. Are you nice? I'm trying to be, David said, realizing that this 8-year-old had just given him more clarity about his priorities than all his business advisors combined. When Sarah returned home that evening with a box of Mrs. Henderson's stress-baked cookies, she found David and Emma building a fort out of blankets and chairs. Emma was laughing harder than Sarah had seen her laugh in months, and David looked more relaxed than he had since she'd known him. Mommy, look what we built, Emma called out excitedly. It's a castle, and David said we can have a tea party in it tomorrow if you say it's okay. Sarah looked at David, who was watching Emma with the same expression she imagined he once had when looking at his own daughter. In that moment, she realized that whatever else might be complicated about David's situation, his care for Emma was completely genuine. Over the next week, an unexpected routine developed in Sarah's small apartment. David had convinced his lawyer to handle most matters over the phone, giving him more time to help around the house while Sarah worked her double shifts. He cooked meals, helped Emma with homework, and somehow managed to make their tiny space feel more organized and peaceful than it had ever been. Sarah found herself looking forward to coming home, knowing that David and Emma would be there waiting with stories about their day. David had a natural way of making ordinary activities feel special. He turned grocery shopping into a math lesson for Emma, transformed dishwashing into a game, and somehow made their modest dinner feel like fine dining with his thoughtful presentation. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this arrangement was temporary and fragile. David's real life would eventually catch up with them, and when it did, she and Emma would be left alone again. She tried not to get too attached, but it was becoming harder each day. On Friday evening, everything changed. David's phone rang during dinner, and Sarah could tell from his expression that it was important news. He stepped into the living room to take the call, speaking in low, urgent tones. When he returned to the kitchen, his face was a mixture of excitement and anxiety. "That was my lawyer," he said, sitting back down at the table. "We've made a breakthrough in the case. It turns out my former partner made some illegal moves in his takeover attempt. The FBI has opened an investigation and they want to meet with me tomorrow." Emma looked confused. "What's the FBI?" "They're like super police officers who solve really big crimes," David explained gently. "They think someone did something wrong at my old job and they want to talk to me about it." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Are you in trouble?" "No, just the opposite. They think I'm a victim, not a criminal. If they can prove what they suspect, I might get my company back much sooner than we thought." That night, after Emma went to bed, Sarah and David sat on the couch talking about what this meant for all of them. The blanket fort was still up in the corner of the room, a reminder of the simple life they had been sharing. "If you get your company back, you'll return to your old life," Sarah said, trying to keep the sadness out of her voice. "Not all of it," David replied firmly. "These past days have taught me what really matters. I don't want to go back to being the person I was before, someone who worked 18-hour days and never had time for the people who mattered. But you'll still be a CEO of a major corporation. You'll have responsibilities, meetings, probably need to travel. This," she gestured around the small apartment, "this isn't your real world." David was quiet for a long moment, then surprised her by taking her hand. "Sarah, I've been thinking about this a lot. What if I could create a new kind of real world? What if getting my company back means I can finally live life on my terms instead of letting the business control everything?" Before Sarah could respond, David's phone buzzed with a text message. As he read it, his expression grew serious. "I need to go to the city tomorrow for the FBI meeting. It might take all day, maybe longer." Sarah felt a familiar pang of anxiety. In her experience, when men left for important business, they often didn't come back the same way. "Of course, you should go. This is your chance to get your life back." "I want you and Emma to come with me," David said suddenly. Sarah stared at him in shock. "What?" "I know it sounds crazy, but I don't want to leave you both here wondering what's happening. Besides, after this meeting, depending on how it goes, there might be media attention. I'd rather you heard everything directly from me than read about it in the newspapers." "David, I can't just take Emma to the city. I have to work, and she has school on Monday, and I can't afford—" "Money isn't an issue," David interrupted. "I can cover everything, and if this goes the way my lawyer thinks it will, I'll be able to access my accounts again within days." Sarah hesitated. The practical part of her brain was screaming that this was all moving too fast, that she barely knew this man despite the intimacy of the past week. But another part of her, the part that had been lonely for so long, wanted desperately to believe that this fairy tale could somehow be real. "What exactly are you asking of me, David?" He took both of her hands in his. "I'm asking you to trust me a little longer. I'm asking you to let me show you a different kind of life, one where you don't have to work 2 jobs just to survive, where Emma can have opportunities you've only dreamed of giving her. And in return? In return, you'd be giving me something I never knew I needed, a family, a reason to build something better instead of just making money. You and Emma have reminded me what it feels like to care about people more than profit margins." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. "David, this is all happening so fast." A week ago you were a stranger in the rain. Now you're talking about changing my entire life. I know it's fast, I know it's scary, but sometimes the best things happen quickly when we're not overthinking them to death. Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. Why are you guys talking so loud, and why is Mommy crying? David and Sarah quickly wiped their eyes and tried to compose themselves. We're just discussing some grown-up stuff, sweetheart. Sarah said, Go back to bed. But Emma, with the intuition that children often have, sensed that something important was happening. Are you leaving, David? David knelt down to Emma's level, just as he had that first day. I have to go to the city tomorrow for some business meetings, but I was hoping you and your mom might come with me. We could make it an adventure. Emma's eyes lit up. Like a vacation? I've never been to the city. Sarah looked back and forth, between David and Emma, seeing the hope in both of their faces. She thought about her life, the double shifts, the constant worry about money, the loneliness of raising Emma by herself. Then she thought about the past week, how different everything had felt with David there. Maybe it was time to take a leap of faith. Okay, she said quietly. We'll come with you. Emma cheered and hugged both of them, while David's face showed relief and something deeper that Sarah was afraid to name. As they got Emma settled back into bed, Sarah couldn't help but wonder if she had just made the best decision of her life or the biggest mistake. The drive to the city was like entering a different world for Emma, who pressed her face against the window of David's rental car, asking questions about every building and landmark they passed. David had managed to access enough money from a small emergency account to rent a decent car and book them rooms at a nice hotel, though Sarah insisted on separate rooms despite his offer to cover a suite. The FBI meeting took place in a sterile, government building downtown. Sarah and Emma waited in the hotel while David spent 4 hours giving testimony about his former partner's illegal activities. When he returned, he looked exhausted but hopeful. They have enough evidence to file criminal charges, he told Sarah as Emma played with the complimentary cookies from the hotel lobby. My lawyer thinks the board will have to reinstate me within the week once the news breaks. The illegal activities invalidate the vote that removed me. Sarah should have felt happy for him, but instead she felt a growing sense of unease. As the reality of David's situation became clear, so did the vast difference between their worlds. They were sitting in a hotel room that cost more per night than she made in a week, discussing legal battles and corporate boards that felt like something from a movie. What happens next? She asked. Monday morning, the FBI will arrest my former partner. The story will break in the business news, probably. By noon, the board has called an emergency meeting for Monday afternoon. David sat down beside her, but there was a distance in his manner that hadn't been there before. Sarah, I need to tell you something. My lawyer strongly advised me not to have any personal relationships that could be seen as distracting until this whole situation is resolved. Sarah felt her stomach drop. What does that mean exactly? It means that for the next few weeks, while the media attention is intense and the legal matters are being sorted out, I need to keep a low profile. No new relationships, no unexpected changes in my personal life that could be used against me. So, basically, you need to pretend we don't exist. David's face showed genuine pain. It's not forever. Once everything settles down, once I'm officially reinstated and the legal issues are resolved, things can be different. Different how? Sarah asked, though she already knew she didn't want to hear the answer. I don't know, David admitted. I'm still figuring out what my life is going to look like, but I do know that I want you and Emma to be part of it somehow. Sarah stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the busy city streets below. She had been foolish to think that a week of playing house could bridge the gap between their different worlds. David, be honest with me. When you go back to your real life, with your penthouse apartment and your executive meetings and your world travels, are you really going to want a single mom who works at a diner and her 8-year-old daughter complicating things? That's not fair, David said, standing up as well. You're more than just a single mom who works at a diner. You're the strongest, kindest person I've ever met. You took a stranger into your home when you had every reason not to. You've raised an incredible daughter while working 2 jobs and never complaining. You've shown me what real strength looks like. But that doesn't change the fact that we live in completely different worlds, Sarah said, tears starting to fall. You're about to go back to being one of the most powerful men in the country. I'm going to go back to my tiny apartment and my double shifts, and my constant worry about making ends meet. Emma, who had been quietly listening from the corner, suddenly spoke up. Are you guys breaking up like when Daddy left? Both adults turned to look at her, realizing she had been absorbing everything they said. Sarah knelt down beside Emma, trying to find the right words. Sweetie, David has some very important work to do and he needs to focus on that right now. We're going to go back home and he's going to go back to his job. But what about our tea party in the blanket fort? Emma asked, her lip trembling. And what about teaching me more chess moves? David's composure finally cracked. He knelt down beside Sarah and took Emma's small hands in his. Emma, I promise that someday, when my work problems are all fixed, I'm going to come back and visit you and your mom, and we'll have that tea party and I'll teach you every chess move I know. Do you promise? Promise? Emma asked. Like pinky promise? David looked at Sarah, then back at Emma. I pinky promise. The ride back to their small town was quiet, with Emma sleeping in the back seat and the weight of unspoken words filling the car. When they reached Sarah's apartment, David helped carry their overnight bags upstairs. The blanket fort was still in the corner, looking smaller and more fragile than it had when they left. I should pack my things, David said quietly. While he gathered his few belongings, Sarah made coffee, needing something to do with her hands. When he emerged with his small bag, they stood in the kitchen where they had shared so many meals over the past week. Sarah, I need you to know that this week has changed me fundamentally. Whatever happens next, I will never forget what you and Emma have given me. And what's that? Sarah asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. A reason to be better, a reminder of what really matters, and the knowledge that love doesn't have to be complicated or conditional. Sarah felt fresh tears threatening. David, please don't make this harder than it already is. He nodded and moved toward the door, then stopped. There's something I want to give you. He pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. This is my lawyer's direct number. If you or Emma ever need anything at all, you call this number. He has instructions to help you immediately, no questions asked. I can't accept that, Sarah said, pushing the card away. It's not charity, David said firmly. It's insurance. It's me making sure that the 2 people who saved my life are never in a position where they can't be safe and secure. Before Sarah could protest further, David kissed her gently on the forehead and walked out the door. Sarah heard his footsteps going down the stairs, then the sound of a car starting up and driving away. Emma appeared in her pajamas a few minutes later, having been woken by the sound of the door closing. Did David leave? Yes, sweetheart. He had to go back to his job. Emma looked around the apartment, which suddenly felt much emptier and smaller than it had an hour ago. Will he really come back like he promised? Sarah looked at the business card David had left on the counter, then at her daughter's hopeful face. I don't know, Emma, but I know he meant it when he said it. 3 months later, Sarah was cleaning tables at the diner when Jenny ran over, with her phone breathless with excitement. Sarah, you have to see this. On the screen was a news article with David's photo. The headline read, Morrison International CEO announces major corporate restructuring, focuses on community investment and work-life balance. Sarah read the article with growing amazement. David had not only gotten his company back but had completely revolutionized how it operated. He had reduced his own salary, implemented generous parental leave policies, and announced a new initiative to provide business loans and mentorship to single parents starting their own businesses. The article quoted, David is saying, I learned recently that true success isn't measured by profit margins or stock prices. It's measured by the positive impact we have on the people around us. This company is going to start focusing on building communities, not just buildings. At the end of the article was a small paragraph that made Sarah's heart race. Morrison International has also announced the opening of their first community development center in rural Pennsylvania, where Morrison will be spending significant time personally overseeing the program. Sarah looked up from the phone to find Jenny grinning at her. Rural Pennsylvania, huh? That wouldn't happen to be around here, would it? Before Sarah could answer, the bell above the diner door chimed. Sarah looked up to see David walking in, wearing jeans and a simple button-down shirt instead of his usual suit. He looked around the diner until his eyes found hers, and the smile that crossed his face was brighter than anything she remembered. Emma, who had been doing homework at a corner booth, looked up and let out a shriek of joy. "David!" She ran across the diner and launched herself into his arms. David spun her around, laughing. "Hey there, chess champion. I told you I'd come back for that tea party." Sarah stood frozen behind the counter, hardly daring to believe what she was seeing. David walked over with Emma still in his arms. "Hi, Sarah," he said softly. "I kept my promise. I came back when my work problems were fixed, and I was hoping that maybe, if you're interested, we could talk about making some new promises." Sarah looked at this man who had first appeared in her life as a stranger in the rain, who had shown her what it felt like to have a partner, and Emma what it felt like to have a father figure, and who had somehow found a way to bridge the gap between their two worlds. "I think," she said, reaching across the counter to take his free hand, "we have a lot to talk about, but first we have a very important tea party to attend." Emma cheered, and David's smile grew even brighter. "Best business meeting I've ever scheduled," he said.